What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Dylan Talks Tone. Welcome to the Just Gonna Say It podcast. It is Tuesday, 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. This is when we do this thing. Thanks for coming and hanging out. And hang out in the chat, hang out in the comments below afterwards, etc. We will also upload this to all of the audio platforms and whatnot later this week, so you'll be able to listen to it there if you don't want to watch it on YouTube's. Yeah, so Spotify and Apple and all that stuff. These are all ad-free live streams, so if you want to support the channel, you can use a super chat in the chat. You can use a, whatever they call those, super thanks. If you're watching it in replay, you can go to Dylan Talks Tone and buy pickups or hats or merch or anything like that, etc. I think we're going to have a new custom drop coming Saturday, which is pretty cool. I got some neat enduros coming that you haven't seen yet, so I'll show you that stuff later this week. And yeah, I'm hoping that everybody is having a good week so far. So today I want to talk about technology. Of course, I've been listening to, various podcasts and stuff, and everybody's talking about AI and the fact that pretty soon, it's going to be Terminator land and everything. And there's all kinds of ways to look at all that stuff. And I was thinking, if you kind of break it down to the elementary components of what a guitar is and how you make music and how you make sound, there is a lot of room for improvement in the processing of sound waves. And not very much of it is applied to guitars, which is kind of interesting. Super chat here. Just because I can. Tazzy Tim, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate that very much. Thanks for the super chat. Yeah, so I was thinking about it and kind of trying to think about how, and you all get in the comments too. Now, this is not talking about digital modeling. This is not talking about, we can talk about that some. But I think there's a lot of ways where if we just kind of set aside tradition for the sake of tradition and then look at really the fundamentals of the engineering of a guitar, there is going to be ways to make it better. There just is. It's first of all, I mean, the bottom line is guitars don't need to be made of what they're made of. I've talked about this before. Obviously, coming from a racing background and being super interested in the material sciences of racing and aerospace, I will tell you that the ability for human beings to be able to engineer vibration in or out of at controlled rates of synthetic materials is very, very high. It's not that hard to look. It is. I'm not saying it's not that hard because it takes very smart people to do it. But very smart people can look at a thing and say, okay, well, if it's this thick, if it's this dense, if it's made of this material, then when excited this much at this frequency, this material will move this much and it will move this much air. The engineering is not mind-blowing to be able to do that. And the fact that nobody's taken the time to do it doesn't mean it's not possible. And I think the reason people have not taken the time to do it is because guitar players in comment sections think they're smarter than the people in the white suits with the pocket protectors that actually do the science. And then they think they control the market. But I think as materials change, because materials are going to have to change based on availability, that we're going to see more technology in the construction of guitars. And I also think as time goes on, we're going to see the construction change because there's going to be less and less people kind of attached to the old way, right? Like I'm always going to have, a Swamp Ash Telecaster, and I'm always going to have an Alder Strat, and I'm always going to have a D28, right? I'm always going to have a mahogany Les Paul with a maple top, right? You're going to have those things. But as time goes on, what are you going to add to it? are you always going to be, is every guitar player always going to be striving in the future for exactly the same thing? I think the answer is no, because the people who think that stuff is important is, well, let's just face it, they're getting old, and they're not as there's not as many of them. So when you start to look at some of the material sciences, bodies, obviously, they can be made in all kinds of ways. 3D printing is very, very interesting. I've been looking at 3D printing because I'm not going to do it, but learning about it in pretty high tech situations, transmission cases, gears, a lot of aeronautic stuff, and then spray forming of metal, and all kinds of various things. Metal injection molding, which is also very interesting. You could do that with metal, but you can also do it with other materials, injection molding. But the level of engineering that goes into it means that it doesn't have to be plastic. It doesn't, So there's all, and everything can be controlled. Everything can be uniform and controlled, which is super interesting. When you start looking at, so take, for example, some stuff that's not in guitar land. Okay. So you take, for example, powder metallurgy in a knife blade, right? It starts as powder and it becomes a solid, and they can measure the density of it. They can measure the thickness of it. They can measure the hardness of it. They can measure the, like the carbide sizes. They can keep everything super uniform. So why couldn't they do that and say, well, okay, well, wood has this inconsistency, wood has this or that, and is susceptible to this or that. So now we understand that, and we can do this with metal. Why can't we do it with something to replace wood? Super interesting. And I know it's possible. I'm sure it's possible. Have people taken the time to do it in a guitar? Maybe not. McPherson makes a really good carbon fiber guitar, and he's done a lot of stuff. That guy is actually really smart. Matt McPherson he actually owns Matthews Archery up there in Wisconsin. And so his whole concept is, if I can stop vibration in a bow, I can start it in a guitar top. So that's kind of what led him down that path. I think it's, I think there's a lot of possibilities. So you think aluminum guitars might become a thing, or titanium? Like, I don't know what reproduces sound the best. So this is interesting. I don't think it's a material that we've thought of. I don't think we as normal guys, right, who are just normal people who just do normal stuff, what do we think of? We think of, like you say, stainless steel, aluminum, titanium, carbon fiber. I mean, how many materials can you name? 10, right? But there's way more out there. When you start looking at different types of plastics, and then when you look at not just plastics, but fiber-based stuff too, and wood-based materials that aren't actually wood, like reconstituted stuff, resin-bonded stuff, like Richlite, for example. Richlite might be a bad example because it's harder and harder to machine, and it's heavy. But because they can do that, can they do something else? There's all kinds of other materials that are much, much lighter. But then the question would be how to scale it and all that kind of stuff. My point in bringing this stuff up is it's possible if somebody would just do it. When you start looking at neck construction, McPherson is an excellent example of this. They've got a whole line of guitars that don't even have truss rods because they're so stiff. Wood and carbon fiber. So, I mean, it's possible. These things are possible. We start looking at even from the beginning until now, the evolution of string materials has a long way to go. Metallurgy is constantly moving. Metallurgy is, I mean, obviously I follow that in the knife side of things, and it's constantly moving. it's constantly moving forward, I guess is what I'm saying. And so we're learning about new stainlesses. We're learning about different ways to make it. They have a spray form stainless now. I think it's RPM 9 is a spray form stainless where it's actually sprayed out of a gun, more or less. And it's a knife blade. They have metal injection molded knife blades now. Who's doing that? PMAG, the people that make PMAGs, they're doing that. What does that mean for frets? What does that mean for strings? What does that mean for nuts? Right? We don't have to use bone anymore. Bone's just dumb. Bone's just dumb. Nuts are dumb. I don't know why anybody uses them. Tell you the truth, they're super inconsistent. They're a pain in the butt to make. They stink, and you got to go through a whole pile of them to find a good one. Honestly, unless you buy, stuff that's already been sorted and whatever. McCarty guitar. I mean, who knows, right? Who knows? I had a Steinberger in the late 80s. I loved it. And this is the funny thing. So people will actually, and nothing against your Steinberger and your thoughts about them. I agree. They're very cool. But I think what happens a lot of times, it's the same thing as like amp modeling, right? Like people will be like, well, I had a pod and it sucked. Well, dude, we're not in the 80s anymore. We're not in the 90s anymore. And the progress at which, the pace at which progress is being made in the material sciences is super, super high. And I think if we were able to allow ourselves to apply this stuff to stuff that we're familiar with, I think it would be amazing. And I think what will also happen is, the biases against materials and the biases against stuff that's super traditional, it will take time to go away. And again, this goes with, again, I'm looking at other businesses because it's already happened. There was I did a video on our other channel about some of my harder use knives. And somebody was like, well, I would really like one of these new super steels, but the internet basically says that they're too brittle. Well, in the old days, stainless steel was way more brittle than a carbon steel. Or it could be. It could, not be as tough, like you could snap it. Well, it's not the case anymore, right? Science has moved on. Same thing with urethane paintwork on guitars. In the 80s, everybody thought that urethane paintwork was so terrible because they chipped off, some paint on the corner of their Stratocaster and they thought it was a 1/2 inch thick. So therefore, for the rest of eternity, urethane finishes are terrible. And they're just not. Urethane finishes now are thinner than lacquer finishes. And they work better. And they're easier to apply. And they're cheaper. Everything about them is better. The only thing that's not better, quote unquote better, in a quantifiable way about a urethane finish than a nitrocellulose lacquer finish is the aging that can happen, right? Because you can, nitrocellulose lacquer will age, where a urethane finish won't age the same. But besides that, there's no other benefit. I mean, if you challenge me on that, well, this is better, that's better. No, it isn't. It's just not. So, that's kind of the thing, especially because they've changed the process about what goes underneath. So if you're using the same sandable sealer under both materials, which they do at Fender, for example, then it doesn't matter anymore what goes on top of it, except for this aging business. So, if you want your guitar to look nice, just get a urethane finish. It's not going to hurt you. It's not 5 feet thick anymore. It's not any of that stuff. Unless you're buying a cheap guitar, then maybe it is. But even then, probably not. So that's a good example. Knife steel shouldn't be brittle if it's heat treated properly. It depends on the steel. So S90V, for example, can be much more brittle than, say, S45VN. It just depends. Magna cut frets. So you make a joke about that. And I was actually thinking about this. I was watching some knife video on YouTube yesterday, and I was thinking, the reason stainless frets aren't more widely used is for two reasons. One is because of cost, and one is because they're very difficult to work. So I believe that this is because nobody has gone to the trouble of developing metallurgically the right hardness of fret. So, can there be a stainless fret or a semi-stainless fret that is harder than nickel, that is softer than a string? It has to be softer than a string. It can't be harder than a string. Well, I guess it could be harder than... No, actually it could. It could be harder than a string because you replace strings. Should be harder, actually. I'm thinking this backwards. I was thinking about strings earlier. So it should be harder than a string. So you wear out the string and not the fret. Not as hard as the tools so that you don't ruin a bunch of tools when you're doing it. And it's easier to work with. But harder than nickel so that it lasts longer than nickel. Right? In knife land or in any kind of machining situation where you're making, something at scale, whether it be, who knows what, any kind of metal piece of anything, there's got to be a way for somebody, if they were to put the thought into it, to say, okay, this normal nickel that we use is obviously too soft, but this stainless is a pain in the butt. Can we come up with some sort of stainless or semi-stainless that's in the middle? That would make more sense. Somebody could do that if they took the time to. The problem is that the guitar business is not big enough to... What you would end up having to do is find another stainless steel that is already in existence that falls in the usage parameters and the workability and cost and all. And I don't know if that exists. But my guess is it's not that it doesn't exist. My guess is somebody hasn't put the thought into it because they're just going, well, I'm just going to use stainless or I'm just going to use nickel. Like that's the only two choices. We have like a two-party system when it comes to frets, right? So it's either friggin' stainless or nickel. Nobody's actually given it actual thought. So you joke about magnet cut frets, but I think that there could be some, super fret to cut, magnet cut, whatever name you want to call it, fret material that would be better than what we have on all counts. But this is what I'm talking about. Technology could do this. We just haven't done it. And then all of a sudden people would be like, well, is it really better? My friend says, and, I read on a Reddit forum and all of a sudden, people hate it. But if you just actually look at the sciences, the material sciences of the stuff, I'm sure it's possible. We'll just have to see. I'm curious about that. Tone is in this stinky bone. What seems interesting to me is that higher end guitars steer towards traditional techniques and materials. It also seems interesting that wood is getting harder to source. Yes. So there's a reason for that. So when you look at, for example, my custom shop Gibson that I have, that guitar is a single piece of mahogany. It's a very nice single piece of mahogany. It is a much more expensive piece of mahogany than what is in my other Les Paul, which is probably 3 pieces. Well, it's probably 2 pieces actually with a 2-piece maple top. Now, does that matter how many pieces it is? No. But the fact that if I want a single piece body, I have to pay for it. If I want it to weigh a certain amount, I have to pay for it. If I want, a certain quality of piece of wood, I have to pay for it. The other thing when it comes to more expensive guitars is, so the consistency of the wood itself, not that matters really that much, except for it matters because it's nicer, right? For example, when you buy a Rolls, remember they used to say, and I don't know if this is still true or not, but they used to say that a Rolls Royce was made from cows that didn't have any barbed wire around them because they didn't want any marks in the leather, right? Or they'll say that, if you look at different, actually, I've been doing some research on this too for some laser stuff. So you have all these different grades of leather, right? So you have like really nice leather and not as nice leather. Now, me and you, we might, like look at the leather on this desktopper right here, and leather's leather, or, like your car seats are leather and there's other car seats that are leather and they're leather. It might not make any difference to us, but for the people that it does make a difference, I want this, it's considered nicer to have this, so I want this. Then you end up having to pay for it. And I think the reason we go back to more traditional stuff with the more expensive guitars is because it is getting harder to do. It's getting harder to execute accurately. And it is easier, in my opinion, to scale up this cheaper stuff because it's easier to source bodies that you can just chunk a bunch of pieces together, and you don't know where the neck came from and all that kind of stuff. So it's super easier, way easier to build a cheaper guitar. I'm into boots. Leather matters. Amen. Me too. 100%. You're exactly right. So, right? If you go to Boot Barn and you buy a set of $165 boots, or you go to Lucchese and pick up a real pair of boots, you know the difference. You know what I mean? And to some people, boots are boots, right? To some people, a pocket knife is a pocket knife. To some people, a guitar is a guitar. But not always. My phone is blowing up today. D2 frets. Yeah, I was thinking about it. I was trying to figure out what D2 came to mind, actually, because it's a semi-stainless. It's super tough, but it's really easy to machine. D2 is actually what had come to my mind when we started talking about that. Oh, it's so funny. Cobalt. Is cobalt going to be a problem? I agree. I wonder about cobalt being a problem. Magnets are getting more expensive. That is definitely true. Yeah, that is definitely true. There are different grades of stainless steel, and some are different hardnesses. Some are softer than others. Oh yeah, I could totally tell you in 2 seconds if stainless is hard or soft. I mean, I could go over there right now and pick 5 different stainless steels and tell you what's different about them. Just if you rub them on a stone, you can tell in 2 seconds how they sound, how they feel. Like, yeah, big time variation and a lot of room to move. These days, it's if you're lucky if you can even get leather. Yeah, good leather. Yeah, I mean, it is. It depends on where you get it. It's true. Yeah. I went and played some of those Indonesian Fenders yesterday. They all played pretty good. I'm thinking that the internet hate for them is for people who haven't tried them. No, I think that it's people that think that it's dumb to put Fender on a guitar that doesn't come from America. That's what I think. I think it is a rebranding of sorts to rescale the price points of the brand that isn't going over well with people who aren't going to buy real Fenders anyway. Because here's the thing. Do I care? Now, I have American-made Fenders, okay? Do I care that that guitar exists? I do not. Are you, for those of you that own American Fenders, do you care that the Indonesian Fender exists with no Squire on it? Does that matter to you? Get in the comments and tell me if that matters to you. My guess is it doesn't. The only people that this matters to is the people that are buying the cheap guitars and wanting it to be something else. Just going to say it. I got a pair of Lucchese boots. Pretty but uncomfortable. You got them sized wrong, I guess. It depends on your feet, man. It depends on your feet. I have 1, 2, 3. I have 3 or 4 pairs of Lucchese's, and I love them all. I have a pair of Tecovas that I like, and they're pretty good. And then I have 3 or 4 pairs of Los Altos too. Yeah. You couldn't care less. Right, exactly. So the people that care about this are the people that care what's on the peg head. The folks that want American stuff, the folks that want a nicer guitar, the American guitar, they don't care because they're just buying the American guitar anyway. So it's the people, honestly, this is a tough thing for people to get their heads around, but this price range, okay? So you have really introductory guitars, right? Like the Squier Affinity. Those folks, they just want a guitar and they think it's cool. And it's a Telecaster and they know it. And they think it's cool. And that's awesome. The classic vibe to made in Mexico area of budget are the biggest, whiniest, complainiest group of guitar players on the planet. It's actually not the largest group. It's not the largest customer base, but they're the biggest, whiniest complainers in the comment section. Below it, they're just happy to have a guitar. Above it, they don't care. So I've been thinking about that a lot since this non-American Fender thing, Indonesian Fender thing came out. And I'm like, you know what? It's making me not care anymore. It's making me not get bummed out about the comments in the comment section. It's making me not worry about people who get annoyed by stuff that doesn't matter in the comment section anymore, because it doesn't matter. They're the ones that are going to complain the most. They're the ones that are going to argue the most in the forums. They're the ones, but are they actually going to be buying stuff? They probably won't even buy those guitars, because they'll probably buy a used Squier made between 19 whatever and 2000 whatever, because they think it's better, because they heard that this one's better, these Squiers are better. Like, it's those people that make all the noise about that stuff, right? Like, well, the Squiers before 2015 were better than the Squiers after 2015, except for the ones that had the whatever. You know what I mean? Those people, like, they're just going to be those people. So don't worry about it. Just let them be those people and buy the guitar you want. If you want that guitar, I bet it's good. Put a set of pickups in it and put some pots in it, and it'll probably be awesome. But I don't think that it's worth wasting mental energy on the guitar, whether it's good or not, and the people that think it's not good. I just wouldn't worry about it. Let's see, what else? Material sciences. Oh yeah. So let's talk about the electronics. Let's talk about components. There's been a lot of development in components. Like, there's no reason anymore to have a huge capacitor in your guitar. You can have a 1/4 watt resistor. Well, let's see. What would be the easiest way to say this? You can have you really only need about a 15 volt at the very most. Capacitor, 10 volt, maybe 5 volt, actually. Doesn't even matter. Capacitor in your guitar, which means you could use a surface mount device, and it would sound totally fine. As long as you had the right material and you did it right, you could use a surface mount. You could use printed circuit boards. You don't have to wire anything. You could have any number of ways to adjust volume and tone in a guitar. It does not have to be a Bournes or a CTS pot. It does not have to be cloth wire. It does not have to be an orange drop capacitor. It does not have to be any of that stuff. There are ways to make that stuff probably sound better and be quieter than anything if guitar players would just do it. You know, the 2015 and ish Gibsons with the circuit boards in them, they had CTS pots in them, and they had really good surface mount caps, and they were great. Those were actually very good systems. But people just didn't like them. There's no reason to not like them. And then it becomes a solderless system, and then you can swap it out. And even now, since then, stuff has gotten better, you know. Yeah, see, Ariats don't fit me. Ariats don't fit me at all. And Dan posts don't fit me. I've really tried to, Justin's, Dan posts, and Ariats don't fit me at all. If you're buying a brand name guitar, it shouldn't matter where it's made. If you like how it sounds, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Capacitors have never made sense to me. If your cap needs to look cool, you aren't playing enough. Yeah, I don't know why it needs to look cool, because you don't see it. It's in the guitar. I mean, unless your guitar's clear, you know. If you got like a John 5 antifreeze guitar or something, then you know, then it might matter, but nobody cares because, you know, nobody cares. Yeah. It's just an interesting that guitar players are so hung up on all these various traditional things, because none of it, you could create an entirely different guitar, different body material, different neck material, different fret material, different bone material, different string material, and it would sound amazing. You know, different caps, different. I talked to a company one time that made optical pickups, which was really, really, really wild. You could actually vary the volume of each string individually. It was super cool. Because all you're doing with a pickup is just, it's a transducer. You're just changing the vibration from motion into electricity, and light is actually better at doing that than magnets are. So, you know, it would be faster. It would work. It'd be super cool. I think all those things would be super neat. Yeah. So the other thing too is, if people would view music as an exploration and not as a duplication, then it would be easier too. So if you buy your next guitar to sound like your last guitar, then you'll never be part of this solution. If you buy your next guitar to explore a new sound and do something cool beyond what you've already done, then it will automatically be a thing, because you're exploring something new. Well, I have, you know, I don't know why people are constantly like, this telly, and I have this telly and I want another one to sound exactly like it. That makes no sense to me. I mean, I already have that guitar. It sounds like that. Why do I need another one to sound exactly like that? I don't get that. It doesn't make sense to me. It might to somebody else. I'm not saying you're wrong. Obviously, you can do whatever you want. But for those of us that want to explore the edges of what's going on, then I think new materials, new ways of building stuff, new doing stuff, and new brands, you know, like that kind of thing. Yeah. Everyone wants to sound like Hendrix or Clapton or SRV, so they think they need that gear. Yeah, but you suck, so you're not going to. There's very few people. Eric Gales sounds like Hendrix. You know, you can name on one hand your friends or anybody that you know that actually sounds like Hendrix. You could name on one hand anybody that you know, even if they have exactly the same gear, do they actually sound like Eddie Van Halen? No. So that's dumb. Like, I get it. I get the loyalty, and I get the, you know, one, obviously, I mean, I have a Slash Les Paul. I have a bunch of signature guitars, because I like the artists, because I think it's cool. I think it's cool to have the stuff. I think it's cool to have the signature artists. I like that a lot. I really do. I think it's really neat. But I'm not going to sit here and overanalyze every little piece of their tone and try to sound exactly like them. They already did that. But that's just me. Obviously, I'm a little weird when it comes to this stuff. Yeah, just make sounds. See what happens. What else we got here? Hey, Ivan, you're late. Glad you're here. And then, of course, amplification. That's already down a pretty big road. Tubes are getting more expensive. Tubes are getting harder to get. Quality tubes are getting harder to get. Amps are getting more expensive in general. You start to look at not just the tubes. If you just look at, some people don't think about a lot is you're shipping a big box. So anytime you ship a 60-pound box, that's a big cost. So when you have an amp, especially an amp that's made in Asia or an amp that's made in Europe, and then it comes to the United States, that thing, the majority of the cost of that thing is moving it around, right? So not just the tubes, not just the lack of experience with maintaining tubes, not just that, but just the general expense of the logistics of shipping a big box around the world that weighs 60 pounds it's a thing. It's a real thing, and so it's a large percentage of the cost of its existence. So we are going to, whether people like it or not, we are going to move to more digital solutions, and they're just going to continue to get better and better and better and better. And already the benefits outweigh the pros outweigh the cons when it comes to digital stuff. If you're willing to buy good stuff. Now, everybody's gonna be like, well, I have a head rush and it sounds fine. And good. I'm glad you like it. But for people that are really, 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 exacting, they're gonna have to put some work in. They're gonna have to put some work into the learning curve and understanding how the system works. Digital solutions are very, very misunderstood about how to make them sound good and what the goal of their existence even is. It's not to replace an amp. There's reasons why you have heard it and it sucks. And there's a reason why other people use them and they sound great. It's because they know the difference. And so putting all that work in and putting all that time in, as well as understanding that it has to be done. Power consumption is a thing. Obviously, cost of moving it, like we talked about, is a thing. And of course, the tubes, that's a thing. But that technology is going to continue to get better. And it's going to be, I don't even have any tube amps right now. And I use digital solutions for just about everything. Not everything, but almost. I think it's going to be the thing. Let's see. Give me Dumble, give me death. I mean, they sound great, but who has that money and who has that time to, play loud and stuff? Let's see. I'm going through some comments here to see if there's anything. Give me Dumble, give me death. That's so funny. Way more innovation in hi-fi speakers than in guitar speakers. Guitar players seem to nitpick specs on their guitars and overlook the speakers. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that there's a lot of people that don't use speakers anymore, which is a whole nother conversation. The way you deliver the sound now is different. It's, it's not just a Blues Junior with changing it out and putting a Cannabis Rex in it anymore. It's not that. There's a lot more to it than that. I just bought a Spark Neo headset. I should buy one of those. I should do that. I don't have one. Let's see. Yeah, no, this has been a fun conversation. I just think it's fun to think about all the cool stuff. I'd like to play a guitar through an electrostatic speaker. That'd be interesting. I mean, it would sound very, it would just sound like you're listening to it on a stereo. I have Martin Logan's, but I don't have the electrostatics. I've always wanted a pair of those, but I've just never gotten around to getting a pair. I have Martin Logan Motions, and so they're the conventional speaker cone, but they have the fancy ribbon tweeter. They sound incredible, but they're not electrostatics. I would really like to have the electrostatics. Sounds great, but volume is low. Okay. Interesting. Well, cool, you guys. This has been fun. Fun to think about technology. I'm excited to see where it goes. I would like to see somebody do those things. Figure out a more workable stainless for frets. Better neck construction so we don't have to have truss rods. That'd be great. And let's see, what else? Yeah, and some kind of body material that is scalable that isn't wood. I'd be totally down for that, you know? Shoot. Of course, strings are always going to get better. Who knows what, man? Be super fun. And I'd also like to see different components in a guitar. I'd like to see more plug and play stuff. I think it would be cool to have a circuit board in your guitar that made it to where you could swap out your pots and caps. I think that'd be cool. Yep. Thanks for hanging out, you guys. This has been super fun, and we will see you maybe Thursday.